Good afternoon, everybody. So my role is Head of Digital Development at the National Theatre, which looks after the creative and technical development of us as an organisation, and particularly the interfaces between ourselves and our audiences. What I'd like to do today is give you insight into the Backstage app that we've recently developed, but I'm just going to start off by giving an overview of who we are as an organisation, whether you don't know us or whether you don't know the range of things that we do. So we're based on the South Bank, just down the river. On our site on the South Bank, we have 4 theatres, a learning centre, a studio, 4 restaurants, an espresso bar, and very importantly, a riverside pub, which is in this day and age very important for business, and a shop. So we've got a really large footfall, and there's a lot going on in the building at any one time. We do typically, this is 2014-2015 business year, 26 productions a year, 10 of which are new plays. That's an awful lot of work that is kind of currently being developed, and we are been referred to as the busiest producing theatre in the world. So actually we're kind of a mini theatre making factory. So we've got metalworks, carpentry, paint frame, which is a big 6-story paint frame with cranes going up and down. We've got an armory where we make bombs and guns. Got to fire a Uzi the other day, which is quite interesting. And to kind of, we've got costumes, wigs, makeup. So basically everything that kind of happens on stages is developed kind of backstage, and so you can see the whole process of theatre taking place. In that year, we gave kind of 3,700 performances to an audience of about 4.1 million. And that includes our live to cinema broadcast initiative, which is called National Theatre Live, and I'll come to that in a moment. We played to 90% capacity houses, which is pretty much unheard of, and 29% of our bookers were first-time bookers, which in terms of new audiences and new people getting involved with your brand is a really healthy kind of percentage. We do UK tours, West End transfers, international tours and transfers, and within the organisation there's generally around about 1,000 people working at any one time. Well, in the building rather, there's about 1,000 people there, and when you've got individual productions in as well, then that goes up to about 1,250 people. In 2013, we celebrated our 50th anniversary, and it was great to kind of bring people back from the history of the National Theatre, and we did a huge stage production that was also broadcast on the BBC. In terms of who we are as an organisation and how that defines how we work, I'm not going to read through our whole mission statement. There are just a few key things to pick up on it. But what is very important is that this mission statement gets revised every year. So we are constantly re-evaluating our objectives as an organisation. And some of them have stayed in for a long period of time, and some of them come in, if they need to, on a kind of, to use your word, very agile basis, because we can change who we are as an organisation. So we want to expand the horizons of audiences and artists. We want to be central to the life of the country and unmatched in the world for scale, range of repertoire, and audience reach, which is a pretty bold ambition, but I think we're getting there, or we are there. We want to attract the best artists and staff by providing an environment which stimulates them to realise the fullest extent of their talents. Now it's a very, very unique culture that we have. I started, when I first went to the National Theatre, that was for 12 months, and that was 9.5 years ago. It's such a kind of creative, collaborative culture that even though I've worked in several positions in the creative industries, I've never quite found one like that before. So I think in terms of talking about the culture that you create, it is that thing about kind of the right leadership to allow the kind of creative expertise to come through. But the thing that's really important for me in my work and for our departments working in this area is that creating innovative digital content is actually part of the mission statement of the organisation now. And particularly for people who think about theatre as being a kind of old, stuffy kind of cultural discipline, to actually have that written in there, I think just shows how kind of cutting edge our kind of cultural sector is in this area and how important it is to us as an organisation for us to be really progressive digitally. To kind of help set some more context about the app and this particular area, just wanted to focus a little bit on world reach. Because we do now have National Theatre Live, which is the Live to Cinema broadcast initiative, and we have international transfers and tours, we've got an audience around the world now that 5 years ago we didn't have. And that's great, but also gives us new challenges, because how do we kind of service these audiences when we've typically been set up to deal with an audience that comes to the South Bank? To give a sense of what National Theatre actually means to us in terms of audience development, we've had, in the year 2013 to 2014, audiences of about 1.5 million, UK audience of 900,000 in over 500 cinema screens across the country, which, to kind of match that off against kind of the cinema industry in general, then a new kind of Hollywood release will go to about the same number of cinemas. Obviously, for a longer run, we're creating destination cinema for one night, but it's kind of really kind of rocketed as a kind of a means for us to engage with people. And what we found sometimes is we did a broadcast of The Queen with Helen Mirren, and there was a cinema in York, and this happens quite often, is that what will happen is they'll actually block out 2 cinemas to show the same broadcast, but throughout the day they actually knocked off another 7 screens because more and more people were turning off. So they were turning off some of the big films, turning people away for that, and actually putting on the live broadcast because the capacity for it was so huge there, which is a really healthy sign for actually when people are getting access to this kind of cultural content, then they're really going for it. So we go to around 1,000 cinemas across the world in more than 35 countries. And those figures, including the total audience to date of 2.7 million, are slightly out of date, so they're higher than that now. So to use Frankenstein as an example, so this is Danny Boyle's production of Frankenstein with Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller. What we had in the Olivier Theatre on the South Bank was that we had 64 performances of that, and sold nearly 75,000 tickets. But from one recording, from one live broadcast, we were able to kind of have over 4,300 international screenings to almost 600,000 tickets sold is what it would probably be now. What we have had with Frankenstein is that it's been kind of cultural annual event, so it gets rebroadcast at Halloween. And we're still seeing really healthy figures every single year. But even not taking into account those encore performances, the original live broadcast, the ability for us to reach more people in one night than we would do an entire run is really significant. And the feedback that we get from our international audiences is great for various reasons, in terms of they've never been to the theatre before, or they used to live in the UK and go to the National Theatre and they've been able to re-engage. It's really worked for us. And I think what's important, actually, in terms of, again, talking about agile behaviour, is that when we launched NT Live, it was an experiment, it was a test, and we were very clear with that, that we didn't know whether this was going to work. We were trying a format that we thought was going to work. And I think even we let our audiences know this. So Nick Heitner, who was the artistic director at the time, did a kind of pre-show commentary. And in it, he said, this is a test, we don't know whether it's going to work. And I think that's really kind of empowering, to let your audience know that this is a test, and all together, we're going to see whether it works or not just the people in your organisation, but the audience that you're working with as well. So in terms of the broadcast and digital departments in the organisation, there's 3 key things that we take from our mission statement that kind of help define the work that we do, because one of the things that we hear from a lot of organisations is, well, there's just so much that you can do digitally. Like, again, that thing of digital strategy versus digital transformation. How do you hone in on those areas that are relevant to you? Somebody says, we need to do social over here, then is somebody else questioning why you're using social for that, or whether it should be another tool? It's really easy for people to kind of get led down a path by standard kind of digital strategies, and it's making sure that's completely right for you. So what we have in terms of access is direct access to the work on our stages. So National Theatre Live is a really good example of that, and starting September this year, then we are also streaming National Theatre Live broadcasts for free into secondary schools in the UK. And we'll be extending that into next year as well, looking at international and primary schools, etc. And to kind of mention that NT Live wasn't a revenue-generating opportunity for us. That's not the reason that we did it. It was about access. It's great to work for an organisation where, yes, we do need to kind of wash our face and kind of sustain ourselves, but actually we're not out for profit. So we can take something like access and really make the most of it and be able to give it free to schools in that way. Amplification is the second area, and this is taking the world of theatre or the world of production and kind of amplifying it in a way that people can get more understanding about what we're doing. So that might be about the process of theatre, or it might be about a production itself. So this was the first TV documentary that we did, which was Making Warhorse, and then we've done 4 or 5 since then. We also do an awful lot of short to medium length documentary for online. And then innovation, which is great for that to be a central part of the work that we need to do. It's the area that I look after mostly, although obviously all the work that we do has got innovation embedded within it. And it's the kind of where those 3 things align that defines what we do as an organisation. So effectively, we're trying to drive reach and engagement through each of those 3 strands. And in terms of this particular project, then driving engagement through content is a really key motivator for me in how we do this. We had business challenges, worldwide audiences, content in lots of different places, although they're good challenges to have. The business opportunities were the things that were more important for us. We've always had a clear kind of path in terms of how we move further and further forward. So even though we had audience demand for our product, the demand internally to develop something like this was also as significant. So the ambition in terms of what we have developed and why we wanted to develop it, for me it's really important that if we're going to put an icon on someone's home screen, then make the most of that. It's an opportunity, it's a privilege. It's really interesting speaking to people in content, with content backgrounds versus marketing backgrounds, in the value that they put against apps. And quite often the people that we speak to in the kind of marketing background see them as much shorter lifespan, not long-term engagement, cheaper as a kind of offering, whereas in the content sector, then it's a longer-term engagement, because actually what you're trying to do is build a kind of a sustained engagement rather than a one-off hit for a particular campaign, both of which are obviously completely valid, but the area that we wanted to go for was that we want the National Theatre device to be sat next to the person's most popular apps that they like engaging with. So Facebook, BBC, Channel 4, Condé Nast, Guardian, they're the kind of ones that I would want my National Theatre app to sit next to if it was on my device. So the basic idea was that we would develop great digital publications that audiences appreciated the value of and were willing to pay for. We create a destination for content that people would be willing to return to, and we would create a blended content offering, so that would have both free and paid for content. So we put an app on your device, there'd be a range of publications that are regularly updated, and then there's this free content stream. And that's the thing that would keep bringing people back. Because for me, we can put an app on your phone and an icon on your home screen that you might select once or twice a year based on the fact that that's when you go to the theatre. But actually, I know that you're interested in theatre. If you're going to the theatre, I know that you're interested in backstage, behind the scenes. I know you're interested in how we do makeup, costume, set design, all that kind of stuff. So if I can repeatedly engage you in that type of content throughout the year, then that's better for kind of us as an organisation and for you in terms of the type of content that you're able to get. So that's how we got to National Theatre Backstage, which is the app that we developed earlier this year on the new DPS 2015 platform. It's got the free content stream in there, what we found is that actually within a month across our different social channels, so YouTube, SoundCloud, I guess Instagram, the blog, is that we actually produced over 3 hours worth of content, which is a lot of content, and I'm not expecting someone to sit down and consume that in one go. But actually what is good is that that might be the amount of content that you would consume across a month. And so if you came to the app once a week or once a fortnight, then there's going to be enough content there for you to consume, and stuff that's actually relevant to what you're interested in. This isn't a marketing app. We market content in there, and obviously any type of engagement is marketing for the organization, but what you don't see here are trailers or kind of calls to action to buy a ticket. This is purely about really decent content for someone who's interested in theatre. Obviously there will be things that are compelling here that then drive people to go and buy tickets, but we're not making those blatant marketing calls. It's about a kind of, if you like, the Sunday papers kind of luxury content time is what we're trying to create. So what we, it's quite interesting actually, this slide says what we launched with is obviously, I made this slide before we launched, is that we had that content in there, we've got premium priced products, and also access to archive programs, which is actually now a lie because we don't have access to the archive programs in there yet, but we are going to be doing that. So we're going to release a collection of archive programs so that you can look at content from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, which in itself is really interesting just to actually look, for me, geekily, at the design styles that happen, but also, you know, the evolution of cigarette advertising over the different decades, how Silk Cut and Benson Hedges and all that kind of stuff. I think there's a specialist publication there in itself. In terms of the free content stream, we worked with Woodwing Inception to create kind of templates that would allow us to kind of bring in either really short articles or kind of long developed articles, because what we want to do is we create stuff that we've kind of aggregated from our existing social channels, and a lot of people weren't aware that some of our social channels existed or the extent of the content that's there. So actually for 90% of this content to be aggregated from those channels is a really efficient way of working, and then we commission additional kind of content off the back of that. The enhanced digital programs are our kind of most significant digital publication. So we take all the content that we have from a printed program, which is the program that people buy when they go to see the show, and then we commission additional content around that. We also have a dual publishing model whereby the printed program comes out at the beginning of a run of a show, and then because we're producing a digital edition, then we update that at the end of the run, so we can actually give people access to content in a way that they aren't ordinarily able to have through print, not just because it's digital by nature, but also by the kind of publication, the publishing process itself. We can kind of live update for people, and they don't need to pay for that update. Audio features, short films, interactives, kind of anything that you can do digitally. We also kind of look to kind of build in what the essence of the show is into the publication. So I'll show a couple of examples in a minute, but that's really kind of, it's going to come on to my next point about kind of the design flexibility that you have. We've developed product pages, which, because for us, it's very important for us to be able to communicate to people what the product actually is. A lot of people don't know that it exists, or what type of content it is, or how good it is. And so we produce article pages as well that promote the kind of different types of content within the app itself. From a design perspective, as I say, we kind of try and bring elements in that are relevant to the production itself, so that actually as you go from, because we're not a magazine, so it's not the same thing again and again. Actually, one show's got a completely different representation to another show and should actually be engaged with digitally in a different way. But what we found is, from a design perspective, what's a really, really enjoyable thing to do is actually not to be defined by page numbers. So we create lots of kind of additional content, but also actually you can give a publication more room to breathe. So we have these things called breaker sections that we put in between different bits of content that just actually kind of layer in the kind of cultural reference points of a particular publication itself, whether they're photographs or illustrations. So you can take more of a coffee table book approach to any type of publication, rather than thinking we're constrained to 56 pages and we've got to get, half of that's going to be advertising or something. So if I could just switch over to the iPad, then I'll just show a couple of examples before I just jump back in to kind of show the rest of the presentation. So this is the app itself, and then what we do at the top is that we've got, this is where we push the premium content, and then as you scroll down, then we go into all the kind of the Backstage articles, and most of them are kind of audio, video in one way or another, but there are text articles in there, and we're just speaking to our audiences now about the types of things that they want to see. There's also really interesting conversations internally about how much free content you give away versus how much you're paying for, because actually if you're given 3 hours worth of really good free content a month, then why do people want to pay for the programs themselves? But actually the programs are quite specialist, where the free content is more broad, so hopefully that's where we kind of get the balance right between those. Just a couple of weeks ago, at the Digital Magazine Awards, we won in the film and entertainment category for Everyman. And what we'd done with this, in terms of talking about how we develop design concepts, the story is about Everyman, who is basically self-obsessed, doesn't kind of has no empathy for everybody else in his life or around the world, and basically God comes to him one day. That's the finger of God, and says, basically, you're not bothered about anybody else. Your time's up. You've got about a week and then death's going to come around and get you. And it's kind of irrelevant. It was kind of repositioned so that the guy who Chiwetel in this production was a kind of lived in Shoreditch, had his face in his phone, was kind of Shoreditch business person, so we say, if you know what I mean. So they were kind of very kind of self-internalized, and what happened is that what we were trying to say is that actually everybody is every man. Everybody is too self-obsessed. Everybody needs to lift the face out of the phone and kind of look around and kind of engage with people more. So what we did was we photographed other people to make the artwork relevant to the fact that actually it was relevant to everybody, not just the person who was playing the key role. So we had just some simple stop motion, which then it was like a double-page cover. And then as you move through the program itself, what we wanted to do was create the kind of whole environment of the publication to exist within where the original artwork was shot. And so that's where the kind of the award judges were kind of thought that was a really kind of nice touch, is because actually we are breaking out, even though we're using software that's traditionally used to make magazines, we're actually breaking out of that and actually pushing it as far as we can go. I think I'll just show you Frankenstein, which is the first digital publication that we did. And so what happened was that Danny Boyle had dual cast Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller, meaning that they'd play The Creature and Frankenstein one night, and then they'd swap roles and play it the other way the next night. And so the whole kind of production was about the kind of dualism between the two roles. And what we wanted to do was, again, how do we kind of make the digital interaction kind of reflect that? So what we did was create basically, people know what the word lenticular means in print? The rulers kind of, as you move them, and the picture changes basically. So as you move to the left, as you tilt the iPad to the left, then it's Benedict Cumberbatch, and then as you tilt it to the right, then it's Johnny Lee Miller. But you've got this kind of nice blended thing in the middle. And then basically you can just play with it keep going and going, which is what we found in user testing, actually. It was really difficult because we created a publication with like 20-odd different sections and 60 different pages, and then we were in user testing, and we couldn't get people to go past the cover. We were just like, actually, we could have just charged $4.99 for the cover, and that would have saved ourselves all the work for everything else. And then just one more thing to show. This is more about kind of the craft of theatre rather than taking on the essence of a show itself. But audiences always tell us that they are looking for, that's interesting, obviously isn't presenting, it needs to load in, more about kind of costume in particular and any aspect of design, which is good for us because that changes as you move from one production to another. So what we did here was that we kind of worked with the costume department who document every costume that's made by taking photographs. So we're now changing the process of how we work as an organization. We get all that documentation. We had a video with the lead talking about how kind of she gets into costume, but we also brought her in and with a kind of 360 turntable kind of came up with this. So as you scroll from left to right, then you can kind of rotate and see the different sides of the costume, which is just an initial test, and we can do kind of better versions of this, but just seeing that it worked and also through the analytics that people keep going back to this again and again is just a really, really good kind of sign of your content working. So if you can just go back to the slides really, really quickly, I'll just bounce through to the last slide. The thing that content commissioning is really interesting for us as well, and I've heard lots of people talking about this, about how you commission content when you've got print and digital at the same time. We've got a 3-year plan, so I'm telling people the 3rd year is when we will be returning on investment. We need to build a product, then we need to market it effectively, and then that's when we can start bringing in revenue. Different marketing challenges, but the thing that just kind of time's up, so I just wanted to kind of end on this, is to say that kind of the DPS for us is a complete end-to-end solution, particularly because we're already an InDesign house in terms of the printed product anyway, so this was kind of a natural evolution. And it gives us the kind of both the original tools to create the content and then the platform to push them all through, which is the app. Okay, thank you.